Everybody wants to scale. Everyone wants a high paying client, but no one talks about what it actually feels like to start at the bottom, where you're doing the small task, you're proving yourself, you are learning in real time, and you're trying to build credibility. And today we're going to talk about the reality of starting at the bottom. Welcome back to the Art of Virtual Assisting with me, Stephanie Lopepe, your host and the founder of Virtually Steph. So today we are going to talk about something that's not so glamorous, right? A reality that we tend to forget to show, and that is starting at the bottom. As a virtual assistant, a service provider, and I'm a woman, we'll also talk about that, right? So, what is like starting at the bottom? It's not failure. It's usually the foundation you build for a new chapter. For most virtual assistants, we've got credibility in our previous careers, right? We've put in the work. Like for me, 7 years in the corporate space, I had put in the work. But when I decided to become a virtual assistant, I was starting at the bottom, right? Starting from scratch, almost like I had nothing built before. And that was a false narrative that I fed into, right? We are not building from nothing. We are just simply stating or building a new foundation for the new chapter, right? And this is how it looks like. You start as a task-based virtual assistant, right? Like everything is a to-do list, right? Because there are others who are so lucky they automatically go into strategy, they go into operations, they go into business management. But for the majority of us, we start at the bottom, task-based, right? And we also have low retainers, right? We are still trying to build our name, trying to build our credibility. People don't know who we are, etc. So we don't necessarily land a high-paying client in the first 3 months, and others even the first 6 months of working as a virtual assistant, right? And if I'm being honest, my high-paying client came into year two. Year one, it was all task-based, all retainer, and that was me starting at the bottom, building the foundation before I could aim high, right? And also starting at the bottom, the foundation that you are doing is that you are building in real time, right? So you are learning on the go. That's why I would say being a virtual assistant is low entry, right? You don't have to come in with so much experience because the majority of the time you are learning as you are doing, right? So that is what it means to start at the bottom, right? And of course, you get to prove yourself through consistency, right? When we say consistency is not necessary, I know we always talk about it in the context of showing up. With a virtual assistant, consistency means that when a client is experiencing you in like high excellent service providing, it means that that is something you need to keep up with, right? It can't be the first month you are energetic, you are doing the work, when is year two, or at least in the 6th month you've lowered your delivery standard, right? That's what I mean by consistency. So you are continuously proving yourself with consistency in how you communicate with your client, in the level of excellence you provide in each time you deliver work, in the level of showing initiative. If you don't know something, you put in the work to figure out a solution. That's what I'm talking about, proving yourself through consistency, right? And that is a virtual assistant. Now let's talk about how starting at the bottom is like for a service provider. Wow. When you become a service provider, it's such an interesting transition, especially when you're coming from a structure of a 9 to 5, right? Because as a service provider, you are accountable for every single thing that you either communicated or you committed to, right? So you don't start with You don't really start with strategy at first, right? As a service provider, when you're starting at the bottom, it's action first, right? Because through that action, you know what works and what doesn't work. And that's when your strategy starts to form, especially for us who began providing a service before ChatGPT, before all these things. We had the University of Google, right? So we start through action, right? Action, action, action. So for me, I began with action before strategy. So a client will ask for something, I would do the task. And then the more I do the task, and I realize, oh, okay, this is how I can structure how this specific task is done. But I wouldn't known that without acting first, right? So that's how it starts as a service provider. You then start to execute, right? So action is execution, right? So with execution, you already know this is how my clients likes things done. This is what I'm providing to my client. So that already becomes a routine. It becomes second nature to you, right? In how you professionally respond to an email. And each email has a different tone. A tone when a client is extremely upset, a tone when a client is excited, or a tone when a client is curious about your client's product or service, right? So all of that is learned through execution, right? And then when you put all of those things together, it compounds, right? That's why I always say you learn on the job because each skills compound on top of the other, right? How you communicate compounds, how you drafting a proposal compounds. So the more you do something, the more you refine your skills, the more it compounds, and then that becomes second nature to you. That becomes something that you can specialize in and then charge more for it, right? So, starting at the bottom as a woman, oh, I've realized how my gender plays in being a service provider only, I think, the last two years, I would say, right? Even when I started, but I think I started paying attention to it for the last 2 years because you just, I'm a service provider, there's no gender here, right? But if you pay close attention, you realize, yes, your gender does play a role, right? How you navigate your confidence, right? How you provide a service, the tone of which you speak to your teammates, to your colleagues, to your clients is closely linked to your gender. So let's talk about navigating confidence. I learned something on the internet is that one has to have the confidence of a mediocre white man in order to succeed, right? There's something about people who are half skilled as you, but when they have that level of confidence, you can't tell, right? So I have to put that in mind with myself, like, okay, yes, I'm a woman, but I'm already discounted in how I walk in the room. So I have to bring it every single time. How I communicate, how I look like, how I walk in the room, how I speak about virtually Steph is really important. So I had to learn that on navigating confidence in different spaces that I walk in with the various clients that I walk in. I'll even tell you a funny story. The majority of my clients were men when I started Virtually Stiff, actually. It was a lot of men that gave my business a chance. And then for there, I started to attend more women-based events, right? And then that's when an influx of women clients came to Virtually Stiff. And that's who I serve for the majority of the time currently, right? But I began in the men's space. And with the guys, they taught me confidence, right? Because, like, I don't know, they just walk in the room like they know it all, right? And I used to be timid. But then I would learn from my clients that, you gotta put a bit of step to your walk. Are you an established business trying to optimize productivity, enhance efficiency, and free up time for strategic priorities? I'm Stephanie, your virtual assistant solution. I bring over 10 years of total professional experience in business management, operation support, podcast production, and event coordinating. And I would love the opportunity to earn your business. Please click the link below and book your discovery call today. That's how I learned to navigate as a woman, being taken seriously. You know, when you would say I'm a virtual assistant, people will be like, "Oh, so you are like a secretary that works remotely." And you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah. I guess that's how they understood." But I had to prove myself, right? To be like, "No, I'm more than an admin person. I'm more than admin support," right? So I did that through the work that I did. I did that through client testimonials. I did that through pitching my work in real time, right? So believing in what I'm saying helped me be taken seriously, right? And also balancing leadership and warmth. And I usually try and do that through my language and through the tone of which I speak, right? From the corporate space, I was taught to always be straightforward. There's no need to sugarcoat anything. If you want X and Y done, X and Y needs to be done. But with the clients that I have, especially because they are women, they speak differently. The tone of which they speak is differently. So I have to balance between being warm, friendly, and between asking for a task to be done. And because I'm leading teams, or at this moment I'm a business manager to a very successful business, I don't always have to be warm all the time. Sometimes you have to put in a tone and be like, "Hey, I asked for this to be done. It wasn't done. What happened?" Right? So you're asking a question, then the person at the end receiving the question is understanding like, "Oh, I messed up. I need to provide a reason why a task wasn't done and what is the solution forward," right? So I have to strike that balance with that. And also the warmth balance when we are speaking to clients, where a client is new to the business, a client is curious about the business, they have a different tone. So that has been a bit tricky for me, but I've realized it's just depending on the context, depending on the scenario, that's why I need to find the tone between the two. All right. So I also want to emphasize on the advantages of starting at the bottom, right? So the first advantage is that you get to rework the systems that work for you, right? So you get to refine certain systems, right? Starting at the bottom will be like a system that could work for you could be like, there are specific days where I'm not able to handle the back end of my business, like the admin side of my business, right? So maybe admin for you could be a Monday and a Friday. Those are admin days. And between Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, those are operations days. Those we are literally working in the business, right? So you gotta figure out what system works for me because I'm just starting out. And because you've got so much time, right? You haven't accumulated so many clients where you can't structure your day. That is the time to do that. So you create new systems for yourself. You create a new structure for yourself so that by the time you are growing, your business already has a way of things being done, right? Another advantage of starting at the bottom, you get to learn communication discipline, right? Because your clients are still building rapport with you, you get to learn how to communicate with your clients. You get to learn that you cannot go more than 48 hours without having to speak to your clients, right? So that communication can be done via email. Maybe a client calls in, then you know how to communicate with your clients. You need to give regular updates with your clients. You just know that this is the season where you refine the way you communicate, whether it's through your current clients or whether it's with potential clients through your content, through your email marketing, whatever it is, this is the time to refine the communication with your business, right? And the last thing, starting at the bottom, you get to learn emotional maturity, or we can even say emotional intelligence. You know, when you are building your business, you get to interact with different types of clients, different personality, right? And that can have an emotional toll on you, if we're being honest. Because I remember with certain clients, when a client didn't know what they needed, right? It had an emotional toll on me because there were certain things being put on my plate that I did not agree through, I did not agree with, or certain things where you know already the right answer, but the client is so stubborn in what they want, right? Where you just have to follow through, right? So it taught me to keep my emotions in check, right? It taught me that a lot of the stuff is not personal, right? This is all work related. Most clients don't know who you are, right? At the start of the relationship, anyway. So when you are doing business with them, you take nothing personal, right? Emotional maturity means like when you're interacting with clients, if you're in the customer service, you don't it's like you don't put your emotions in the response to the client. You just understand a client needed something. We just need to assist the client to get what they want, right? Or maybe there's miscommunication, or the client doesn't understand your product offering, right? So all those things, it teaches you emotional maturity. It helps you improve your emotional intelligence. So now it is time for our virtual assistant insight segment. And today's question is, how long should I expect to stay in the beginner phase as a virtual assistant? If I'm being honest, the beginner phase has no fixed timeline, right? Because it's all about your skills development, right? So you could stay in the beginner phase for 6 months. You could stay in the beginner phase for 3 months. You could stay in the beginner phase for 2 years. It really depends on you. What is the skills requirement, right? So you move out of the beginner phase once you've mastered the following things, which we've already discussed. Consistency, right? How you show up to your client, how you show up online, how you show up as a brand, right? Communication. Have you improved your communication skill, right? In writing, with your emails, with your proposals, communicating how your business is, your service offering, communicating in terms of customer service. So if you've mastered this thing, you are slowly coming out of the beginner phase, right? Reliability. Are you a reliable service provider? Right? Can clients count on you to take a commitment and execute that commitment? If you are still struggling in being reliable, you are still in the beginner phase, right? And lastly, you mastering basic systems, right? Are you able to efficiently help clients run their businesses, right? Are you able to master all the skills, right? So if you can master consistency, communication, being reliable, the basic systems, you're already out of the season of the beginner phase, right? So others take months, others take years. It all just depending on the skills development. And what delays it is not even time. It's about you being comfortable in the discomfort, right? So are you comfortable with learning, relearning, upskilling? If that's you, then you can improve faster. You can go from being a task-based virtual assistant to be an operations-based virtual assistant in less than 2 years. Okay. So, my encouragement for you is that starting at the bottom is not a weakness. Starting at the bottom is just a foundation you are building for your business. It will be uncomfortable. Sometimes you feel uncertain, right? The income may not be consistent, but it's just the season you need in order to build something powerful, in order to grow as a service provider and as a virtual assistant. So comment, like, share, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what do you want to discuss more, any other topics you want me to go in depth on, topics that we've already discussed that you want me to expand on, and I'll see you next time. Bye.